still avoid being alone on New Year's Eve, and it has nothing to do with parties or fireworks. It happened a few winters ago, during one of the coldest stretches our town had seen in years. I'd already done the family visits earlier in December, and by New Year's Eve, everyone I knew either had plans or had left town. I didn't mind at first. I actually welcomed the quiet. There was something comforting about knowing the roads would be empty and the world would feel paused for a night. I spent the evening inside my small rental house, drinking a couple beers, flipping between channels, half watching the countdown on TV. When midnight passed, I didn't feel any different. No sense of celebration. Just a strange restlessness that settled in once the noise on television faded and the house went quiet again. By around 1:45 a.m., I felt too awake to sleep. My body felt stiff from sitting all day, and the silence inside the house was starting to feel heavier than the cold outside. I checked my phone, threw on a thick coat, gloves, and a hat, and decided to take a short walk through the neighborhood. The moment I stepped outside, I noticed how still everything was. Fresh snow covered the streets and lawns, dulling sound in a way that made the whole area feel abandoned. Most houses still had their Christmas lights on, glowing softly behind frosted windows, but I didn't see movement anywhere. No cars, no music, no voices drifting through the air. Even for New Year's, it felt unusually empty. I walked without much direction, letting my boots crunch through the snow, my breath puffing visibly in front of me. I don't know how long I wandered like that. Time felt stretched and blurry in the cold. Eventually, without really meaning to, I found myself near the small park at the edge of the neighborhood. The walking path cut through a stand of trees and curved around a frozen pond. I'd walked it dozens of times before, even late at night, but something about it looked different now. The lamps along the trail were off, leaving the path swallowed by darkness beyond the first few feet. I hesitated, then stepped onto the trail anyway. The snow was deeper there, untouched except for my own footprints. After a minute or two, the darkness felt thicker, pressing in from both sides. I told myself I was being dramatic. It was just a park I knew well. Still, the silence out there felt unnatural, like the woods were holding their breath. That's when I noticed the second set of footprints. They ran parallel to mine. At first, I thought they were older tracks I hadn't noticed, but the edges were sharp, freshly pressed into the snow. Whoever made them hadn't been there long. What made my stomach tighten was how closely they matched my pace, step for step. Close enough that if I'd stopped suddenly, I felt like someone would have bumped into me. I stopped walking. The tracks beside mine stopped too. I stood there, staring into the darkness ahead of the trail, listening for anything, footsteps, breathing, movement. But there was nothing. The trees loomed silently on either side, their branches heavy with snow. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe someone had been walking just before me and stepped off the trail. But when I followed the footprints with my eyes, I saw where they left the path. They didn't turn around. They veered off into the trees. That's when the cold stopped feeling refreshing and started feeling dangerous. I turned and walked back the way I'd come. Faster now, not quite running, but no longer enjoying the walk. I didn't look behind me. I didn't want to know if the tracks followed. When I reached the neighborhood streets again, I forced myself to slow down. I told myself I was fine. I walked for another 10 minutes before heading home, checking reflections in dark windows as I passed, half expecting to see someone behind me. I didn't. When I got inside, the warmth hit me immediately. I locked the door, shrugged off my coat, and felt stupid for letting my imagination run wild. I decided a hot shower would help shake the nerves. Halfway up the stairs, I noticed something that made me stop. The upstairs was dark. Every light was off. That shouldn't have been possible. I hadn't been upstairs since early that morning, and I always left the lights on. Always. I stood there on the staircase, listening, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing sounded in the quiet house. I flicked the hallway light on. Nothing looked out of place at first. I walked slowly down the hall, peeking into each room. The bathroom was empty. The spare bedroom, untouched. My bedroom, exactly how I'd left it. I closed each door behind me, trying to convince myself there was a simple explanation. When I turned back toward the stairs, my chest tightened. The door closest to the stairwell was open. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I'd closed it moments earlier. I stood frozen, heart pounding, the light buzzing softly above me. I called out, my voice shaky, asking if anyone was there. The sound echoed down the stairs and into the silence below. I took a step toward the open doorway, then another. That's the last thing I remember clearly. I woke up on the hallway floor, disoriented, my head throbbing violently. My vision swam as I tried to sit up. The clock on my phone told me only minutes had passed, but it felt like a chunk of time had been ripped cleanly out of my memory. I knew, without needing proof, that someone had been there. I called the police, with shaking hands. They arrived quickly, searched the house, and found no sign of forced entry. No one nearby had seen or heard anything. By the time they finished, the sun was beginning to lighten the sky. Days later, after the snow melted, I found something that made me move out for good. Behind my house, deep in the woods, was a narrow path, one that led straight to my back window. It wasn't new. Someone had been using it for a long time. I still have a hard time talking about this, even years later. Not because I don't remember what happened, but because I remember it too clearly. At the time, I worked overnight maintenance at a mid-sized ski resort in a remote mountain town. It wasn't one of those huge, tourist-heavy resorts you see on postcards. It was smaller, older, and surrounded on all sides by dense forest and steep terrain. Once night fell, the place felt completely cut off from the rest of the world. During the winter season, the resort closed around 9 p.m., and from that point on, only overnight staff were allowed inside. My job was mostly cleaning, restocking rental areas, and making sure everything was ready for the next day. Technically, I was also considered part of security, but that title was generous. We didn't carry weapons. We didn't have cameras covering most areas. We were basically just a human presence meant to discourage trespassers. After a few thefts earlier that season, management made it a rule that 2 people had to work overnight shifts instead of 1. On paper, I wasn't alone. In reality, it always felt like I was. My coworker that winter was a man named Evan. He was older than me, quiet, and had been working at the resort for years. Our shifts overlapped, but the building was divided into 2 large wings, connected by a long corridor, and Evan was always assigned to the opposite side. Entire nights would go by without us seeing each other once. We barely spoke beyond quick check-ins. That night started like any other. Heavy snowfall earlier in the evening had left the resort buried in fresh snow. By the time I clocked in, the wind had picked up, rattling the building in long, hollow groans. The main lodge was empty, the lights dimmed, and the silence felt heavier than usual. About an hour into my shift, I was mopping near the front windows when I heard something that didn't belong, a soft, rhythmic tapping. At first, I thought it was ice or snow hitting the glass, but it was too deliberate. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. I walked closer to the windows and immediately noticed fresh footprints in the snow just beneath one of them. They were clear, deep, recent. They led right up to the glass, then curved away toward the side of the building. My stomach tightened. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, the cold biting into my face instantly. The wind had already begun to erase the tracks, but I could still see where they headed, straight toward the parking lot, where the plows had already cleared everything. After that, the footprints disappeared. Whoever had been there had vanished into a blank slate of snow. I didn't walk the perimeter. The temperature was brutal, visibility was poor, and something about the silence made me want to get back inside as quickly as possible. I locked the door behind me and tried to shake it off. Maybe it was someone lost, maybe someone curious. Either way, I told myself it was done. It wasn't. About 30 minutes later, I heard movement from the connecting corridor, doors opening, footsteps echoing. Then Evan appeared. He looked wrong. His face was pale, his eyes unfocused, like he'd been jolted out of a deep thought. "What are you doing over here?" he asked. I told him I was working, confused by the question. He nodded slowly, but his expression didn't change. After a moment, he muttered something about being tired and turned to leave. Before he did, I mentioned the footprints outside and asked if he'd been walking around the building. He shook his head immediately. "No," he said, too quickly. He didn't ask any follow-up questions. He just walked away. That was the last normal thing that happened that night. Less than an hour later, a loud bang echoed through the resort, metal slamming against metal somewhere near the corridor. It was loud enough to make my chest vibrate. I dropped what I was doing and headed toward Evan's side of the building, calling his name. No answer. The farther I went, the colder it felt. The lights on that side were dimmer, and the air smelled like snow and metal. When I reached the back area, my heart sank. The rear service door was wide open. Snow was blowing inside, and fresh footprints led away from the building, straight toward the ski lifts. I called Evan's name again, louder this time. Nothing. I checked every room inside, storage closets, bathrooms, offices. He was gone. Against my better judgment, I put my coat back on and stepped outside, following the footprints. They led across the base of the slope, past the lifts, and up toward the tree line. That's where I stopped. The prints didn't just head into the forest. They disappeared into it. I stood there, breathing hard, when movement caught my eye. Something shifted between the trees. A silhouette stepped forward, too tall, too still. It wasn't Evan. I ran. I slipped, fell, scrambled back toward the building, never once looking over my shoulder. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, then ran to the front desk and called the police. It took them nearly 30 minutes to arrive. I hid in a storage room the entire time, listening to the wind howl and the building creak. At one point, I heard a door open somewhere far away. I didn't move. When the police finally arrived, they searched the entire resort. They found another set of footprints near the back door, fresh ones. Someone had come back. Evan was officially listed as missing that night. They never found him. And sometimes, when winter comes back and the mountains go quiet, I still wonder what would have happened if I'd followed those footprints just a little farther. I don't like long drives anymore. I used to love them. Just hours of empty road, music low, thoughts drifting. But one trip in particular changed that permanently. This happened 3 winters ago, right before Christmas. I was driving from Washington down toward Idaho to visit my older sister and her family. I hadn't seen them in almost a year, and I wanted to surprise them. The drive was long, close to 14 hours, if you didn't stop much, but I'd done worse before. I planned to leave early, push through most of it in one go, and pull over only if I absolutely had to. That plan fell apart about 5 hours in. The weather forecast mentioned snow, but nothing serious, just light accumulation and reduced visibility in some areas. I'd heard that kind of thing 100 times, but somewhere after sunset, The road changed fast. 1 minute, I had clear pavement. The next, the world turned white. Snow started coming down sideways, pushed by winds strong enough to shake my car. The highway emptied out completely. No headlights in front of me, none behind. Just darkness, swirling snow, and reflective signs barely visible through the storm. At first, I pushed on. I kept both hands tight on the wheel, eyes locked on the faint tire tracks ahead of me. But after another 40 minutes, my shoulders ached from the tension, and my visibility dropped to almost nothing. Then my phone buzzed with a severe weather alert, and seconds later, my signal disappeared entirely. That's when I knew I needed to stop. I spotted a rest area sign just ahead and took the exit. The road curved into a small clearing surrounded by dense trees, their branches heavy with snow. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for one vehicle parked far from the building, a dark sedan already half buried under fresh snowfall. I pulled into a spot closer to the restrooms, shut off the engine, and just sat there, listening to the wind slam against my car. It was loud, constant, and unsettling. Snow piled up on my windshield, faster than I could brush it away. For almost an hour, I stayed in my car, waiting for the storm to ease up. It didn't. If anything, it got worse. The world outside my windows faded into nothing but white movement. Eventually, I decided to go inside, mostly to use the restroom, but also because the cold was starting to creep in, even with the heater running. The moment I opened my door, the wind hit me like a wall. It stole my breath and burned my face. I pulled my hood tight and hurried across the lot, head down, boots sinking into fresh snow. Inside, the rest stop was silent. The building was small, a single room with benches, vending machines humming softly, and 2 restrooms at the back. The heat was on, weak but noticeable, and I stood near the entrance for a moment, just warming up. Through the front windows, I could barely make out the other car in the lot. It hadn't moved. No lights, no engine noise, just sitting there. I remember thinking that was strange. I walked toward the men's restroom and pushed the door. It opened maybe 2 inches before stopping, then slowly pushed back toward me. Not slammed, not locked, held. I froze, staring at the narrow crack. I pushed again, harder this time. The door resisted, then pressed back just enough to make it clear. Someone was on the other side. My heart started pounding. I stepped back without making a sound. The building was still completely quiet. No footsteps, no voice, just the low hum of the heater and the wind outside. For a brief second, I considered trying the other restroom, but the thought of staying in that building any longer made my skin crawl. Something felt wrong, not just uncomfortable, wrong. I turned and walked out. As soon as the door closed behind me, I heard the restroom door open. I didn't look back. I crossed the parking lot as fast as I could manage in the wind and snow, jumped into my car, locked the doors, and sat there breathing hard. A few minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then I noticed a movement outside. At first, it was just a shape forming in the storm between the building and my car. A person slowly becoming visible as they stepped closer. He stopped about 20 feet away. He was holding a phone to his ear. Even through the blowing snow, I could tell he was facing me. He stood there for a long time, pacing in small circles, talking into the phone. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his body language felt deliberate, like he knew exactly where I was. Then he started walking toward my car. Not directly. He'd take a few steps, stop, pretend to look around, then move again, like he was trying not to seem threatening. When he got close enough for me to see his face, he looked straight into my windshield and smiled. Not a normal smile, wide, stretched, too intentional. He tapped on my window. I couldn't move. My hands felt locked in place. My mind screamed at me to drive, to do something, but my body refused to respond. He knocked harder. Then, behind him, I saw another figure emerge from the rest stop building. This one was running. That broke whatever spell I was under. I slammed my foot down and threw the car into reverse. The tires spun uselessly. Snow sprayed everywhere, but the car didn't move. The first man was at my window now, pounding on the glass. The second man was closing the distance fast. Finally, the car jolted backward. I didn't think. I just turned the wheel and floored it. As I sped past them, I caught a glimpse of the second man raising his arm. Something flew toward me. It hit the windshield with a violent crack and bounced away into the snow. I didn't stop to look. I didn't slow down. I drove blind through the storm, heart hammering, hands shaking, until the snow finally thinned and my phone buzzed back to life with a weak signal. I pulled over and called the police immediately. By the time they reached the rest area, hours had passed. The men were gone, but the other car was still there. It didn't belong to either of them. The police told me later that the vehicle belonged to a man reported missing earlier that week. He'd been driving through the area alone and was last known to have stopped somewhere along that highway to rest. They never found him. I still think about that night whenever I see snow falling hard against my windshield. I don't know what those men planned to do, but I know one thing for certain. If I'd stayed inside that rest stop for even a few seconds longer, I wouldn't be telling the story now.